There was a randomized control trial that integrated lifestyle and CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy approaches, and it showed improved depressive symptoms versus doing CBT alone. Nutrition, first of all, is not a replacement for therapy, but nutrition is a powerful amplifier. It can help the person get to less symptoms or managing their anxiety and depression better when you can include food into the mix and you prioritize it as part of the treatment plan. Welcome to the Wellness That Fits podcast, where we help busy moms eat well, restore energy, and clear brain fog without sacrificing family time or your sanity. I'm Cassie Groeschl, registered dietitian and mom of 3. I believe wellness should fit your real life, not the other way around. If you're tired of complicated wellness trends and want simple, sustainable strategies for meal prep, holistic nutrition, and time-saving routines, you're in the right place. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Wellness That Fits podcast. If you've been feeling anxious, overstimulated, dealing with brain fog, low energy, or mood swings that feel out of your control, I want you to hear this clearly. Your brain is not broken, but it might be undernourished, inflamed, or dysregulated. And today I'm starting a series that connects the dots between your food, what you're eating, and your mental health. So we have a term for this. It's called nutrition psychology. Maybe you've heard of it before. If not, nutrition psychology is the study of how dietary patterns influence mood, cognition, stress resilience, and risk of mental health disorders. So this is grounded in physiology because your brain requires a lot of different things that you get through your food. So it requires amino acids that you would get from protein items because they're needed to create neurotransmitters. Your brain needs fatty acids, which you're getting from healthy fats, because it's what the majority of your brain structure is made out of. Your brain requires vitamins and minerals because those are what are needed to make those enzymatic reactions happen. And your brain needs glucose. Your brain is probably one of the most glucose-hungry organs that you have in your body, and it uses that glucose or sugars for energy. And so when those inputs are inconsistent or inflammatory, symptoms show up as anxiety, depression, brain fog, fatigue, and a number more, but those are the ones we're going to mostly focus on today. And so we're really going to look at this through the lens of nutrition psychology. We're going to get into the gut-brain axis right now, but I just want to give you a little heads up of what's next. We're going to talk about the gut-brain axis. We're going to talk about studies that have been done that are linking mental health and nutrition. We're going to talk a little bit about diet and therapy versus diet alone, and kind of why this all matters for your health. And so to get started, let's talk about the gut-brain axis. I know you've heard of it. I've talked about it on this podcast, and so I know you've heard of it in the wild and in social media and news and things like that. And so some key concepts really with the gut-brain axis is there's constant communication between your gut and your brain, going bidirectional, meaning it's going from your gut to your brain and also from your brain to your gut. And the key mechanisms in which this is happening is through your vagus nerve. So that's a large nerve that's going from your gut to your brain, vice versa, and that vagus nerve signaling. There's also communication not only from the vagus nerve, but also immune system activation. So if something happens in your gut and it activates your immune system, and then those molecules then reach your brain. And there's also communication in microbial metabolites, and that's what we're going to mainly talk about today. And so the microbes in your gut, when they break foods down, they create metabolites, and those metabolites can reach your brain and communicate with your brain. And that is part of that communication, that constant communication that's happening between your gut and your brain. And your microbes in your gut can influence how you react to situations and your mood and your anxiety and your overall mental health. So I wanted to also talk about the fact that 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut. And some studies even showed 95% of serotonin is produced in the gut. And so, if you think about it, if your gut microbiome is imbalanced, it can shift signaling more toward anxiety and low mood and increased stress reactivity. And so, let's take a look at some of the research, the actual clinical evidence that we have around nutrition and its impact in some of these mental health disorders. The first one I want to talk about is the SMILES trial. This is a RCT, or a randomized control trial. There were 67 adults with major depressive disorder in this study, and the intervention was a Mediterranean style eating pattern plus nutrition counseling. And in the control, so that was the experimental group, right? In the control, they had social support, which, of course, as we know, is also important for mental health. And what they found is that there was a 32% remission in the diet group, or that Mediterranean style eating pattern, versus only 8% remission in the control group that used the social support. So that's a significant improvement in depression scores by adding in nutrition components. All right. And so I talked about the Mediterranean style eating pattern, and the fact that we have the majority of the research that we have around mental health and nutrition psychology is really based on the Mediterranean diet, or the Mediterranean style eating pattern is what I like to call it, because it's not like a specific diet. And I also think there's a bad connotation that people associate with the word diet. And so it's more of like an eating pattern. And so Mediterranean eating pattern and mental health. I'm going to talk about a meta-analysis of observational studies. And so this is a large cohort, and it's looking at over 36,000 participants. And what it found is that a higher adherence to the Mediterranean eating pattern, meaning people who stuck with as much of the Mediterranean eating pattern as possible, so like people who stuck better with it, had a lower risk of depression. And so basically, what this is saying is a dietary pattern that's characterized by Mediterranean, if you're not familiar, high intakes of fruits, veggies, whole grains, and a variety of whole grains, fish, especially fatty fish like salmon and tuna, olive oil, low fat dairy, antioxidants, and then also low levels or low intakes of animal foods. That's the Mediterranean diet. And that's what was associated with a decreased risk of depression. Now, on the opposite side, a dietary pattern, and you'll notice here, I'm going to list off kind of some components of this dietary pattern, but it's really similar to basically a Western diet, or the diet of most Americans. So a dietary pattern characterized by high consumption of red meat and or processed meat, refined grains. Really what that means is it's processed where the bran is removed from the grain, which makes it the whole grain. And so when you remove that when you remove that bran, you have a highly processed, refined grain, and you're losing a lot of nutrients and fiber that way. And so high red meats, high refined grains, sweets, high fat dairy products, butter, potatoes, and high fat gravy, and then coupled with low intakes of fruits and veggies and all those things that are associated with fiber. And that's the pattern that is associated with an increased risk of depression. Now, I wanted to take a moment and talk about the fact that I had mentioned in the Western diet, some of those major components are like butter and potatoes. And what I wanted to say, just because when I see potatoes, I know immediately people are going to think potatoes are bad. And really what it is, I mean, because we see different types of potatoes in the diets of blue zones, people who live to be 100 or more. And so I actually did an episode on that one. If you want to go back, go look, you scroll through the episodes. I can't remember what number it is, but I did an episode on the blue zones diet and what they're eating. And there's two of the populations in the blue zones that have a lot of potatoes in their diet. So it's not necessarily saying eat less potatoes here. Usually what we're seeing in the Western diet pattern is that they are fried potatoes. They are in the version of French fries. They're in the version of chips, like highly processed foods. And that's more so what that Western diet pattern is that we really need to look out for. And so again, blue zones like Okinawa, Japan, like 60% of their diet is potatoes. And then also Ikaria, Greece, a big component of their diet is potatoes. Usually how it's made, of course, is what makes it healthy. And like in Ikaria, Greece, they're roasting potatoes with olive oil and lemon, right? And some salt and pepper. And so it looks very different than how the majority of Americans, I would say, eat their potatoes. And so just want to make that distinction. Overall, again, to summarize, what we're really talking about is looking at 36,000 people. So tons and tons and tons of people. We're not looking at pilot studies or studies with 10 participants, 15 participants. These are studies that look at Mediterranean eating style and mental health. There is a decreased risk of depression in people following high intakes of fruits, veggies, whole grains, fish, olives, nuts and seeds, low fat dairy, and then low intakes of animal foods. Okay, so I also want to talk about a couple of these other studies that I found. And we're looking at diet and therapy versus therapy alone. There's growing evidence that combining nutrition with therapy, mental health therapy, right? Very important. That combination improves outcomes. And so let me give you an example. There was a randomized controlled trial that integrated lifestyle and CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy approaches, and it showed improved depressive symptoms versus doing CBT alone. Okay, so the cognitive behavioral therapy. And so there are a few studies that are like this that shows that whenever nutrition is added into therapy, there are better outcomes. And so it reinforces the idea that nutrition, first of all, is not a replacement for therapy. Of course, therapy is very important, but nutrition is a powerful amplifier. It can help the person get to less symptoms or managing their anxiety and depression better when you can include food into the mix and into the picture, and you prioritize it as part of the treatment plan. Okay, so why this might matter for you. If you are a person who's anxious and experiencing brain fog, all the symptoms we talked about, and you're also running on caffeine, skipping meals, eating highly processed foods, not getting enough micronutrients, maybe you are doing your absolute best to get your protein in because you know that's super important, but you're completely neglecting your fiber intake. Your brain is working uphill. You are trying to feel calm and you're working on yourself. But in a body that is stressed, you're biochemically stressed, you're not providing the foundational building blocks that your body and your brain need to thrive. And so if this episode helped you connect the dots, please take 10 seconds to rate the podcast or leave a review. I would love a review. This is how information reaches more women who are struggling. Okay, so if you are thinking, yes, I'm anxious, I'm checking these boxes, and I don't have a plan for my wellness and for my nutrition, and I need help applying all of this information, this is exactly what I do. I help women experiencing anxiety, stress, and low energy improve their symptoms using targeted nutrition strategies. So share this episode, reach out to me. I love to see you, my listeners, in the DMs, and email me any questions that you have. And again, like I said, I am doing this series. And so it's really going to be focused on targeted food and nutrition and mental health. So I will see you in the next episode. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Wellness That Fits podcast. I hope you walk away with simple, doable steps you can put into practice right away. If you loved this episode, it would mean the world if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with another busy mom who could use some encouragement. Until next time, friends, keep creating wellness that fits your life.